Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the Machine Man, Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Title card reads, I am awaiting my apotheosis.
This week on the show, our ongoing series on blind spots continues as we go through our 10 selected films from the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound 2022 Critics Poll of the top 100 films of all time that, of course, we haven't seen. This week, we are up to Matt's second pick out of 5. We are going to be talking about the 1927 German classic film Metropolis. And I think, Matt, that's it for this week. Turns out there's not a lot happening when the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild is on strike. So we don't have a lot of other stuff to talk about right now.
Yeah, since there's no content coming out, me and Scott are going to be pivoting to being fitness influencers. So I guess look forward to that.
Yeah, I can't wait to tell you about all the times I've gone to the gym in the last month. There's so many of them.
I'm going to make a YouTube video about anterior pelvic tilt.
I don't even know what that means.
That's good.
All right, Matt, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about Metropolis. What is this movie all about?
In a futuristic city sharply divided between the working class and the city planners, the son of the city's mastermind falls in love with a working class prophet who predicts the coming of a savior to mediate their differences.
This movie was written by Thea von Harbu and Fritz Lang. It was directed by Fritz Lang. It stars Bridget Helm and Alfred Abel. It is number 67 on the Sight and Sound list, and it is, of course, a silent film. The first silent film that I think we've ever talked about on the show. I think that's correct. I can't think of another.
I think you're right.
So Matt, before we get into what we thought of this movie, I was wondering if you could give us like a brief, not explanation, but just your thought process behind selecting this movie as one of your 5.
Well, I had always heard that this is one of those incredibly influential films. It was in some senses the first big science fiction film. I don't know. I don't want to say it was the first science fiction film. I don't quite know if that's true, but it was this groundbreaking thing back in 1927, I believe.
Yep.
And it has, reverberated throughout our art until the present day. I had heard that it visually influenced everything that came after it, and I had seen a few snapshots showing kind of comparisons. And so that was one reason, is I just like to understand the history of the things that I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, hey, if it's this thing that influenced all of these great directors and made them want to copy it, at least aesthetically, why? Like, what's so great about it? That's pretty much it, honestly.
Yeah, no, I like that. So tell me, what was your experience like with this film? Did you enjoy it? Did it live up to those lofty expectations set for you? What'd you think?
Well, I'm not a connoisseur of silent film as a medium. I'm not used to watching it. It is hard to watch a silent movie.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains have been reprogrammed. The TikTokification of modern film makes it very hard to watch a movie that is silent and paced quite slowly. This was a 2.5-hour movie. I personally watched the complete Metropolis, which was reassembled from a variety of scraps of film that had been discovered all around the world in odd places, because this was a movie that was released in like 57 different versions of different lengths all around the world.
Yeah.
Because just that's the way things were back then. You had different censoring policies, and you had general lack of respect for the idea that the film was just this finalized piece of art. So anyway, it's kind of cool, the idea that they reassembled it, but the upshot is that it ends up being incredibly long.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, that's sort of a preface to say that's a general comment about silent film. As for the specifics of the film, I did enjoy the visual element of it quite a bit. There were so many visual moments where I'm either like, yes, that shot's from The Fifth Element, or rather, that Fifth Element shot is from this movie, or Blade Runner, or oh, it's that sort of oppressive Art Deco style that has been in so many other dystopian science fiction movies that you almost just see it as background. You just take it for granted. You don't even wonder where it's from or if it's
Yeah.
from anything. And we could talk endlessly together about that. As for the story element, I have to agree with a lot of the critics of the age that it's pretty insipid. It's just very flat, right? It's just very I think I could generously call it like archetypal storytelling, where it's just very basic storytelling that is
Yeah.
not really the kind of science fiction I like is the kind that kind of challenges your perceptions of humankind, and this honestly was not that. This was uh well behind the curve in terms of what had already been established in the science fiction genre of that age. And I just don't think the filmmakers were too concerned about that. I think they were trying to make something visually spectacular. I think they more than succeeded at that, and that merits this movie being on this list. Personally, I talked for a while there. What did you think about the movie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've probably watched more silent film than you have. I'm guessing here. I don't know that for sure, but I think so. And I like silent film. Okay, I think it's this really interesting thing where like I would be lying if I said this film captivated me, right? That turned it on and it sucked me in, and 2 hours went by, and I was like, wow, I didn't even notice that 2 hours went by. No, I actually watched this film over the course of 2 days in like 20-minute spurts. In
Yep.
between doing doing other things. That's how I experience this movie. Is that the most ideal way to experience this movie? No, probably not. But that's okay because like you, I didn't find the story particularly captivating. I liked it, but it is pretty simple. It is pretty bland. I think I use the word naive. I think it's really funny actually because um I was watching this movie and going like, this is like a pretty simple and naive outlook on politics and the world. Um, but I bet back in the 20s they were like, "Whoa!" And that's when I read the reviews that you just talked about that said that exact same thing about it back 100 years ago as well. That people
Uh-huh.
back then thought the same thing. But yeah, I think I agree with you. Like this is. It is an art form in silent film where you cannot like it is more difficult to be complex and complicated in your storytelling because you are limited to just expression and gesture and character action and a few dialogue cards every so often, and that's all you can do. And so they're very very limited in what they could do here, and it is very clear that to Fritz Lang the focus is the visuals. The focus is trying to do things that no one had ever done before, trying to like the number of extras in this movie are remarkable.
Mhm.
Like it's easy to look at a scene like when we're getting the Tower of Babel sequence and going like, oh man, that's a lot of people. I bet they just CGI or copy pasted some people. And it's like, well, they couldn't really do that. It was 1,000 extras. It was 1,000 extras with their head shaved, and I think they did like use film techniques to like double them to get up to 4,000 extras. But it was 1,000 people that they needed to get for that sequence, and they need
Yeah,
them all to shave their heads.
yeah. There was a lot of interesting stuff about the production of this film that it took this enormous length of time. Apparently, he's a very demanding director.
Yeah,
Kind of reminded me of James Cameron in a lot of ways.
yeah, a little Kubrickian as well in that the number of takes he wants.
Yeah, yeah. Specifically, the Cameron comparison occurred to me because in the scene where they're like flooding the tunnels, the children were basically forced to like stay in this cold water for prolonged periods of time,
Yeah,
which was
not
uh,
great.
not ideal. But hey, it's 100 years ago, and he made a really great film. So can we really say it was bad? No.
The other element is that he insisted on using real fire on the scene where the Maria robot is burned and her dress lit on fire. She was not harmed, thank God. But like
Yeah.
really playing with fire here,
Ah,
actually,
yes.
literally.
Part of me wishes, I'd say actually a big part of me wishes that there were less story and that it were just sort of a symbolic fever dream full of archetypal imagery and iconography and bizarreness, because the story as it is like very stupid. Like I'm not like at like and here's one thing, even the director himself in later years was like, yeah, I wasn't really interested in this story. Like I was interested in machines and portraying machines and making something visually spectacular. And it's like, yeah, I could tell. Um
Yeah, I mean, so let's like a brief summary of the story is that there's this giant city.
uh-huh.
There are two classes. There's the people that live in peace and happiness in the gardens above the city, and then there's the working class that lives under the city. And these two sides collide, brought about by Maria, a woman that is like the prophet of the working class, and then Fred. I don't know German, so
Yeah, I sure. Freighter.
the son of like the president or the leader, the man in charge of the Metropolis, kind of come in contact. He sees the plight of the common man and kind of learns to love them and want to bridge this gap between these two sides. There's also a robot, and the robot is assumes the form of Maria in order to sow discord and start riots and blah 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 blah, and everything blows up. And the final message is that the head and the hand must only communicate through the heart. Is
Uh-huh.
the repeating refrain of this film,
Yeah.
which great sentiment. Sure, it's not really how anything works ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, you're like the blah de blah unfortunately covers quite a lot, because like
Yeah.
there's like this woman that named Hell that the like and like
Rotvang.
Rotvang is in love with, and the
Yeah.
city guy is also in love with, and but the city guy steals her away, and then she's the mother of our main character, but then the evil scientist Rotvang tries to recreate her with the robot, and it's so and like it's not that's like you can see the influence of that down into Blade Runner and tons of other places.
Yeah.
So that's fine. It's just like it was kind of this mess of elements, and then all of it being held together by this really just inner message.
Yeah,
So
I think there's this thing that I feel where this is a film that is really pushing up against the limits of silent film storytelling. Like it is like there's moments in the film, especially near the end, where I feel like we're going shot dialogue card,
yeah,
shot dialogue card, shot dialogue card. Like
yeah,
where there's just too much going on. There's too much of a story that's trying to be told, that the only way to explain it to people is through these dialogue cards, and that is very disruptive. The best silent films, in my opinion, use them sparingly, only when they absolutely need to. They absolutely have something that needs to be said, that needs to be explained, and then they use it and then move on. But there really felt like near the end of this movie, it was just constant dialogue card, dialogue card, dialogue card, and that really messes with the flow. And especially in a movie where the attraction is the visuals, to have just constant cutting to these black screens of dialogue that you read. Just yeah, I mean, it's the limit of this method of storytelling. We
yeah,
feel being
yeah.
pushed against.
And I think I basically said all I want to say about how I didn't find the story to be the best element, because it's like, yeah, well, everybody agrees with that pretty much.
Yeah, even
Um,
the director agreed with that. Yeah.
yeah, I did appreciate the visuals. It was pioneering in terms of miniatures. They invented a bunch of techniques. They invented a technique involving using mirrors to make it seem like the actors were inside a miniature set,
Mm-hmm.
which is not even something I really knew about, but apparently they invented it, and then it was in use for quite a while, I guess. So that's cool. Just overall, pretty impressive stuff. Where like there'll be some big like mechanical contraption that the workers are interacting with or what have you, and I guess I found it always looked really good. Like I never had that feeling of like, you could tell this was made in the 1920s. Like it almost always looked very like surprisingly well made from an artistic point of view.
I agree. I totally agree. Like so much of this, it is rather fascinating, the experience of watching something that is the origin point for everything. Like every science fiction movie you can think of was in some way owes a debt to this. And watching this and experiencing this and being like, oh yeah, I recognize that design, that idea, that concept, like and it's all here, and it looks great. Yeah, it's been almost 100 years and it looks great. These techniques have the staying power.
Mhm.
The city itself, the Metropolis, looked great. Just the different ways in which Fritz Lang like shoots the stuff, I thought was like
Mhm.
the one of the most famous scenes, I think, is the workers toiling, the two shifts passing each other with the giant gates, and that was just remarkably composed. I was in love with that whole sequence.
I agree. The angles and the composition was always remarkable. If you go look at shot to shot comparisons between Metropolis and movies that it's influenced, like you can actually look up a sort of a famous, internet famous collage that shows shots from Blade Runner that are basically mirror images of shots from this movie,
Hmm.
and very often what makes it very arresting and makes you think like, yeah, that's definitely an influence is that Fritz Lang has used such an interesting and avant-garde angle or composition, and that in that particular movie, Ridley Scott copied not just the subject matter but even the angle and the composition of the shot.
Yeah,
And and,
yeah.
and I saw there's one scene where there's a woman sort of strapped down to a table with these bands over her body, and I was like, it's Lulu Dallas multipass. And then I
Yep.
looked up the comparison shot that I had in my mind, and I compared them, and they're like exactly the same angle, and and again composition. I will say the Metropolis shot has the woman lower down in the frame with more kind of Tesla coil shit happening in the top part of the frame, but I think that's doesn't really mean that it's an obvious influence is what I'm saying. Very
Yeah.
very obvious, and not just like, again, not just like the idea of a woman with bands over her, but like, oh, this is such a striking like way of showing this and the angle and everything.
Yeah,
So
no, I totally agree. I mean, and even just the Machine Man design itself, is something that countless movies have kind of borrowed from. This central design, this idea of, I don't even know what to describe. It's like this movie is very Art Deco, right?
mhm.
Like this movie took Art Deco and like and threw it everywhere, and even the design of the robot is Art Deco in
Yeah,
a lot of ways. Um,
yeah,
like it is pretty remarkable. It is like that is, if I had to like focus on one thing, and this is an interesting thing about a list like this, because I think you're absolutely right. It is fascinating. The last 2 weeks we've done this list. We've had Blue Velvet and we've had The Piano, two movies that I think it'd be fair to call incredibly complex from a narrative perspective. The
mhm,
things that they're trying to do, the exploration that we're doing with the characters, though, were complex movies, and we had a lot to say about those characters and what the movie is doing with them. And then we have this movie that is not that at all. I don't really have anything to say about these characters. I mean, I could talk about the performances a little bit, and I will.
yeah,
But the characters themselves are pretty one note. It's the evil scientist. It's the evil leader. It's his innocent son. It's the angelic prophet. It's like these are all pretty basic, and that's fine. But yeah, we're kind of forced to just say, man, this is a good movie to look at. That's all
yeah,
I have to say about it, really.
yeah. Yeah, basically agree totally. I do want to talk about the acting. Um, I found the acting to be mostly, I guess, sort of what you expect from the vaudevillian influenced silent film era,
Hmm.
and then like sort of on top of that, and so forth. You've got the female lead, whose name I'm looking up right now, which is why I'm
Maria.
vamping, Brigitte Helm, who was just amazing,
Oh, she's incredible.
and very fun. Like, so, like the thing for those who haven't watched the movie is she plays this, saintly priestess woman for the first part of the film, with this just like very kind of vivid stare into the camera, and she's very floaty and elegant in her movements. And then her form is copied by the replicant, I mean the Machine Man, and so then she plays the robot character, and she like I swear Pris um in Blade Runner is like doing almost as good a job as she is doing at like her kind of like spasming and like flailing and like demonic succubus type portrayal, and it's just like a totally different character, like different
Yeah.
facial expressions. It's just really fun to watch that transformation, and then so you see both versions of the character back and forth because the machine being and the real woman are now running around, and it's just really fun.
It is, and gosh, she's so good. And there's never any moment where you could like, you always know in which scene, which version of that character it is, right?
Yeah.
She's doing this really interesting thing with her eyes, where she's like trying to be a little cockeyed,
Hmm.
with one of them. Like she's always got one eye and a squint, but
Yeah.
not the other. And that is off-putting and weird. It's just this really effective. You talk about the limits of silent film and what it can do, and the way she's able to express the non-humanity of this character through just those movements, just those facial expressions, is remarkable. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, she was my favorite
Oh yeah.
human aspect of the movie, you could say.
Yeah.
The other actors, I guess, honestly, the leads, I was generally just like, yeah, that's kind of what I expect for silent film. But then, like, the extras were actually kind of fun. You already mentioned how many extras there were.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I think one thing I was impressed by was like a lot is demanded of the extras from an acting point of view, because there'll be scenes where there's like a crowd of extras, like a pretty big crowd, and they're all in this moment they're a mob, okay, and the mob is super mad, and they're coming for blood, but maybe a few scenes ago those same people were you know watching this angelic presence with hope and wonder in their eyes, and all of the characters in the background, all of the extras are emoting this vibe. It's a thing I guess you don't see that often. I mean, you don't see it never. It's not like there are never crowds in movies, obviously.
Hmm.
It's just a thing that struck me as being really well done in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, especially the idea that you know that like that all the extras are extras, like they're real
Mhm.
extras. Like this is all these people. They had to get hundreds of kids to do the sequences with the kids in the water. It like I read actually it was super easy to get all those kids because this was Germany in the 1920s, and unemployment was rampant and people were desperate for anything. So getting a whole league of kids willing to work for a little bit of money was super easy. I guess that's something that is worth talking about. We've talked about kind of the naivete and the simplistic themes of the movie, but it does strike me that this is a film that was written and released in a post World War One Germany, right? That is just completely devastated economically, and it does strike me as a kind of rational, logical response to that horrible level of economic instability and just crippling poverty experienced by so many people. That let's take this, let's take that, and also let's take Fritz Lang going to New York and seeing New York City for the first time and extrapolating these two things out to their logical conclusion in his mind, which is big giant mega city, still hugely inequitable arrangement.
Yeah, and the idea of mechanization as
Yeah.
this
Hmm.
this thing that can produce both wealth in the form of the above ground people in their mega city, and then also devastation and inhumanity, and
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
There's a lot to Original Sin, right? That like this, like the first thing we see that the robot does is she becomes a dancer,
Mhm.
very scantily clad dancer, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
That just like it just dances in front of men and like drives them to violence against each other. And that's it's just this. She literally dresses up as the whore of Babylon in
yeah,
this movie. And so this representation of this kind of uh revelation level end of the world sin, the creation of sin, the creation of automation and this kind, and transposed onto the form of a woman just leads to the downfall of mankind as a whole.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Christian imagery,
For sure. Yeah.
and thematic content as well. I guess that shouldn't be altogether surprising. I guess I am still surprised nonetheless because it was so overt. We have Christian themes throughout much modern art. It's
Yeah.
threaded throughout our whole society in ways that are, well, we forget that that's even Christian theme very often. But this movie was very much just like, it's Babylon, it's the Whore of Babylon, it's the Tower of Babel,
Yeah.
yeah, biblical quotations. Everybody's names struck me as sounding biblical, although that might just be because they're German and I don't know German. I don't know what names are common in Germany, honestly.
I think the one guy who helps out uh Freder is named Josaphat, and I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure that's a biblical name.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
right to me.
so yes, no, I think your feeling there is spot on. That tons of biblical allusion, tons of, and it makes sense. You know, this is not necessarily good versus evil. It's a little more complicated than that, I guess. But you know, the concept of sin and the concept of us creating a world that destroys ourselves through our sin is really prevalent here for sure.
Mhm.
I do think it's pretty fascinating. Like this is a movie that is both very critical of power imbalance and um the concept of class divides, but it's also a movie that seems very critical of the idea of like revolutionary um system destroying overthrows, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
that is the bad guy of the movie's plan, is to use her to incite the common people, the working class, into violence. And that is seen as a horrible result, that their violence, they've been spurned into this act of violence that ends up flooding the entire undercity and almost wiping out all the children, wiping out their future. And that's an interesting idea. You know, you would think, like I read about this film kind of a little bit before we saw it, and it was like, oh, the communist undertones of this film were very heavily criticized when it first came out, and so I was expecting more of a revolutionary, like pro-revolutionary type of story, and it's really not that.
No. No, it's not at all. And that's the biggest, like, what reads as the biggest anticlimax to a modern viewer is the fact that, you know, they sort of almost have a revolution. They do destroy the machine, and then they all come to the surface, and then the guy who's the prophesied mediator is just like, come on,
Just hold
just
hands.
hold, come on, and there's like, 30 seconds of both sides being like, no, I won't hold hands, and then they finally hold hands, and then the movie literally ends right then, and
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
wait, like what? But like, so are they gonna hold on a second? Hold on a second. If the machine stops working, doesn't the upper society stop functioning? And like, what is the solution here? Are they gonna keep working the machine, but they're gonna be given more of a share of its production, or are we just not gonna have the machine anymore? And this is an austerity play. Oh, I see. We don't care about any of that. It's
No,
all
it's just the heart. Now that the heart is the
yeah, yeah,
mediating between the hand and the brain,
uh-huh,
everything is going to be fine, Matt. Everything is going. Don't worry about it.
yeah,
Just don't worry about it.
yeah. Once again, I think even the director realized that that's pretty thin.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's functional as kind of like a fairy tale
Yeah,
story in
yeah,
that way.
yeah,
That of like these two sides. The problem is, of course, from a character perspective, like there's just no believability. Like Frater's father, I just don't believe ever would behave that way. Nothing in the movie told me that he would be like, "Oh, I feel really bad now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna change."
No.
So
Yeah, it's whatever. I honestly, I was barely even paying attention to the story while watching it.
well, true. The problem is I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
This is the struggle I'm at. We're 30 minutes into this episode. This might be our shortest episode ever because like I can say the visuals were beautiful, the compositions were great. I loved seeing the ways in which all these other movies took these ideas and ran with them. I think this is a movie that like when you're a critic, you're sitting down to come up with your best films of all time list, and you look at this movie and say this is the starting point for everything, and so I have to honor it as such. That's why it's on the list, and I think that's a fair reason to be on the list. But yeah, from an analysis perspective, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, right. Same place as you. I guess. I mean, I guess that actually is a nice lead on into a separate topic, really, but a thing that I think we wanted to talk about, which is things that this movie has influenced that we do love, and maybe we can credit like Blade Runner 2049, like we said before. There's a long list of movies that you could say were strongly influenced, at least visually and also somewhat thematically. Pretty much anything with replicants like
Yeah,
the
the
Blade Runner
concept of
films.
there's I feel like the entire concept of a artificial creation like a robot being made to pass as a person
Yeah.
to influence and control, and yeah, I feel like that's part of it.
Yeah, so we've got that throughout a lot of movies. The visual style. I think you can really see it in stuff like The Matrix, Ghost in the Shell. Obviously, Blade Runner, I think, is the most kind of direct. Gattaca definitely has the Art Deco thing going on really
Ga-
strongly, and
yeah, Gattaca was the movie that I kept thinking about while
mhm.
watching this movie. We've never talked about Gattaca, have we? I love that movie so much, and
Yeah,
there's so much Gattaca in this movie,
yeah,
actually.
there definitely is. I mean, thematically as well as visually, for
Oh yeah,
sure.
oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's funny because, well, okay, so he saw New York City and he was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And this is New York City in 1920 whatever.
Yeah.
So just our modern reality blows the science fiction imaginings of the people who made this movie completely out of the water.
Hmm.
Just every time I go downtown, I see something that looks like Metropolis.
Yeah, yeah.
um, so that's you kind of got to wonder. I wonder how many architects are influenced by either.
I mean, that's the fun thing about this, right?
Mhm,
Is like you can sit here and look at this movie in 2023 and go, "Man, this was really prescient about how we design our cities now."
mhm.
Or
Yeah,
or you could go, a lot of architects really loved this movie and took inspiration for how they design buildings from this film,
yeah,
which I think is probably actually closer to the truth
yeah, and
of things.
or at least other movies were influenced by this movie. Other art was influenced by this art, and then the architects were influenced by that. Right? It's all this
Yep,
web,
yep, yep.
and you're never really sure.
Mhm.
So that is a cool thought. I enjoy that. Um, yeah, I guess I don't have a ton more to say about the influences. I mean, I think Blade Runner, both visually and thematically, is the closest where it almost really does feel like a kind of remake, a kind of spiritual remake,
Sure, yeah.
where we have almost one to one mappings of some of the characters. We have the idea that there are artificial people that are playing important roles.
Mhm.
We have like this sort of Frankenstein esque creator figure who makes these artificial life forms. Um, um, there's there's the massive cityscapes, the kind of underbelly of the I guess it's LA. So there's like the LA kind of underbelly that's where it's always raining and wet and awful and overcrowded, and then you ascend the pyramid to this incredible opulence at the top of the world, where where the wealthy rule, and in that story, it's not that there's a giant mechanical machine that people are toiling under, but it's more abstract. It's this system, and the system is made out of these artificial people. um and I think that's like very much honoring the thematic ideas, while I think leveling up the places where this movie was weaker on the story front.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Like, I think that's the cool thing about like the the concept of what's the word? Not borrowing, but paying homage to the stories that came before you is, we've gotten better at telling stories via the medium of film since this movie came out. We're good at it now, but part of this is we have sound now, and that, so it turns out, helps a whole bunch. And so we can look at this movie and be inspired by this movie, and basically rip it off visually, but then also say, but I think we can build something on top of this. Because I do think the thing that was missing from this movie, to me at least, was the interiority of the robot, right?
Hmm.
We don't ever really see if the robot wants. Does it want? Does it feel? Is it just truly like a mindless, like, I'm doing this? Because there are moments where it seems like it's taking enjoyment out of what it's doing. Um, and then of
Yeah,
course it gets set on fire at the end, and I couldn't help but wonder, like, if we cared about this thing as a character, I wonder how much more emotional this would be on me. And that's exactly what Blade Runner does,
yeah,
right? It says, okay, well, let's explore that very thing
yeah.
right there.
If you just look at the character design of Rachel in Blade Runner, it's exactly the same. Like the actress even looks like her. She's got thick, heavy eyeshadow. If you were familiar with Metropolis, and then you watch Blade Runner, you'd be like, oh, it's going to turn out that she's a robot, obviously, because she looks just like the robot version of Maria, I guess it is.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm pulling up pictures now as you're talking, and God, you're so right. No,
yeah,
this
so
is great.
the hair is, it's funny. Her hair isn't quite like that, but she's always wearing like some elaborate crown or something on her head, which Rachel's hair ends up looking like.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's totally it. And like she looks exactly the same. It's so interesting. It's so interesting because you always hear, oh yes, Blade Runner is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep made into a movie, and now I'm like, it's obviously half Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, half Metropolis.
Yeah.
Um, like it's like, I don't know why nobody ever said that, but it is.
I'm sure someone has.
No, in the first person.
Yeah, and that Ridley Scott's never said that in an interview
Yeah,
ever.
yeah. He would be shocked at the comparison, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I like, I think that's so cool, and I love it so much, right? I like, it's this weird thing. Like, here's the thing, actually. Citizen Kane has long been considered like the greatest movie of all time, right? And a lot of the reason for that, arguably for many people, most of the reason for that is for its influence on the medium.
Mhm,
Citizen Kane did a lot of things, invented a lot of techniques, like this movie, came up with a lot of shot composition, shot editing techniques that basically define how modern movies look. It's a movie where you go back and you watch that movie, it doesn't look as dated. It doesn't seem as dated because so much of how we do movies now, um, are based on what Citizen Kane did.
mhm,
But also, and I know I'm not the only person to think this, I would argue that Citizen Kane is also, just outside of that, just like a really good movie too.
mhm,
Like, I legitimately, genuinely enjoy it as a film experience outside of all the firsts it did. This movie, to me, is kind of the other side of that paradigm, where, like, I don't really have any desire to ever watch this movie again.
mhm,
But, like, I'm super glad I did, and I respect the hell out of it as a thing that was instrumental in designing what science fiction looks like for the next 100 years.
mhm. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna bring up the thing I always bring up, which is like Lord of the Rings, did influence every story that came after it, especially in the fantasy field. But it's also just an amazing book on
Mhm.
its own, and you should read it and take it for what it is,
Yeah.
and not. It's not like you have to muscle down Lord of the Rings. It's just great actually,
Mhm.
and that's not the case with most things. And I would say, yeah, I mean this is really cool, and I'm glad we watched it. But I kind of agree. I'm not going to watch it again. I honestly, this is kind of what I expected to happen. Is I expected to be like, yeah, it's super visually well done, visually masterful. But that's kind of all actually.
So let me ask you a question. What what silent films outside of this one had you seen?
I don't remember, which probably means very, very few. I know not zero.
Mhm.
I have not, but I just can't. I just can't think of which. It might be as many as two maximum over the course of
Mhm.
my life, to be honest. So,
Yeah, so I think maybe the thing we can conclude this very short episode on is going to be, my recommendations to you. I think watching the Chaplin films is a thing that everyone that's a film fan needs to do.
mhm,
You don't have to watch all of them, but like City Lights, I think is probably this might be arguable, probably the best, if not one of the best Chaplin films. It's a thing that I think people have to experience, and it's a movie that I think the issues you had with this movie and the story of it are not going to be a problem because um, it is. I mean, it's Chaplin, right? It's slapstick and it's fun, but it's also there's a bunch of gags. It's just a great fun movie.
mhm,
There's another movie I saw. So many many years ago, back when I was in college, I got the AFI top 100 films of all time list, and I was working my way through them, and there was a film on there called Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, which I think is one of the most well-known silent films ever. And this is a movie that, unlike Metropolis, is a movie that captivated me for the hour and a half that I watched it. It is it is a fascinating story. So the basic story here, Matt, is right outside a city there lives a man and his wife, and the man is having an affair with this bob hair, like 20s haircut hussy that came from the city, and his wife finds out about it, and the woman convinces him to murder his wife. So he rows out into the middle of a lake with her, intent on pushing her in and drowning her to death. And then, like, at the last minute, he can't do it. So instead, they just row the boat across the lake and into the city, and they spend a day in the city falling back in love with each other, which is like an absurd thing that I just said there, right? Like attempted murder into, oh, I love you again. Um, but somehow in the in the context of the film, it works.
uh-huh,
And this is like it is silent film doing, I think, what it does best, where like these characters are not very complicated. They don't even have names. It's just the man and the wife. That's it. It is archetypal. It is supposed to be this overarching story of love and living in the modern world and all these things, and it's just really wonderful, really wonderful. Really recommend that to everyone.
yeah, cool. Sure, I'll watch that.
Yeah, and there's a bunch more. I think Nosferatu is the OG horror film, right? There's the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I've never actually seen that one, so I can't comment on it. And then I believe the Passion of Joan of Arc. I think this one came out in '97 as well, but
Okay,
that's another very famous silent film. I've never seen
cool.
that one either.
Nosferatu is the one with the real vampire in it, right?
Yeah, the 100% real, definitely real vampire. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you have these recommendations because I am woefully lacking here, and I'm sure there are stars of the firmament of silent film that everyone should watch, and I guess I would say this probably is one of those, but more for historical interest than for enjoyability.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's going to do it for Metropolis. Shorter episode, not too much to say this time. I will reiterate, like the point of this whole project was for us to watch movies that unless we did something like this, we probably never would have gotten around to see. And in that frame, I'm very happy you picked this. I'm very happy we got to watch this.
Mhm.
Because I think this is a movie I should have watched a long time ago, and I'm glad I did, despite not like loving it.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is usually I like to not read too much about the critical feeling about a movie before I go into these discussions with you, because I like to sort of query myself and sharpen my own sense of like, well, what do I feel about this,
Mhm.
and not just read what Roger Ebert said and kind of have that just like blank out whatever it was I was thinking.
Sure.
In this case, I really did see this as a matter of historical interest more than like what did the movie make me feel, because it didn't make me feel a whole lot. So again, I probably wouldn't have read as much about Metropolis this week if we hadn't been doing this project. So
Mhm.
yeah, this is helping me sort of become more well-rounded culturally, which
Yeah.
is fun.
That is the whole point, right? That is the whole point. Fun fact: Adolf Hitler loved this movie. Really pissed off Fritz Lang that he liked it so much.
Uh-huh.
And I think actually Goebbels, Fritz Lang was Jewish, by the way, and
Yeah.
Goebbels said, "Well, we can make you an honorary Aryan. We get to decide who is and isn't Jewish," which is just fucking.
Uh-huh.
Just these people were. I mean, surprising no one. Those people were terrible, right?
Yeah.
Hitler and Goebbels, terrible people. But
Uh-huh.
I just love this idea that he crafted this movie, and then like the worst possible person to him is like, I loved it.
Yeah.
Thanks. You would be perfect for making Nazi propaganda films for me. And then Fritz Lang was like, fuck you, I'm out. And he left and went to France. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Imagine how incredibly disturbing that would be.
I know, to feel that way. I wonder if that's part of the reason why he distanced himself from it going forward, right? Because you're like, did I do something wrong? Did I not tell the story right? Is the problem in how I told the story, or is the problem the story itself, that a person like Hitler and Goebbels could look at this and be like, hell yeah,
Yeah.
this is exactly what I think how the world works.
Yeah, it does make you feel like maybe I could have been more precise with my messaging. Well, luckily Hitler and Goebbels died in a movie theater in the early 40s.
Are you doing a are you doing a Tarantino thing in Glorious Bastards?
Yes.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's how it happened. That is how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that's going to do it for Metropolis. The next film on our list is my second pick, and I actually picked Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, a movie that we've referenced several times because everyone knows the structure of the film. It's the structure of this film is named after this film, and so really something that I've needed to watch for a long time. But pretty excited about this one, Matt. I've watched a lot of Kurosawa films, but this is not one of them, so I'm excited to visit this.
Me too. 100%. Like you said, keeps getting referenced all the time, including by us. Can't wait to watch it, realize that we've been referencing it wrong.
Yeah, I wonder if the structure of this film is actually not at all what we think it is, and we've just been wrong this entire time.
Uh-huh.
We're just getting in front of microphones and trying to be intelligent, be like, you see, the last duel is a Rashomon structure. It's like, no, you idiot, it's not. We'll find out.
Yeah. All right.
All right, folks, that is it for this week. If you want to reach out to us, please do so. You can let us know what you thought of Metropolis if you watched it with us. What do you think of silent films? What are your favorite silent films? You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
That is right. And we actually have an important message for you folks. We probably should have led the episode with this, but hey, we're not perfect. We're not robots, right?
That's right.
We have an announcement for those of you that maybe have come to this show from Kingslingers, or if you are just a Stephen King fan in general. Matt and I, as part of wrapping up season 3 of Kingslingers have long been talking about traveling to Bangor, Maine, Stephen King's hometown and influence for many of his books, including the novel we're reading right now. We're going to do it. We're doing it. We're doing it in June of 2024, June 14th and 15th. And we are making it a big live event. So we are like planning behind the scenes and doing all the stuff. And we want as many people to come as possibly can. And part of this whole thing is gathering some information to get an idea from you folks, how many people are interested. And so we've created this survey. Matt, do you remember the URL for the survey? I made it and I'm forgetting it right now.
Give me a second.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
No, it's okay. I just don't remember it. I think it was doofmedia.com/Bangor survey.
That is it, yes.
And yes, I'm correct.
Awesome. So yeah, if you could head to doofmedia.com/Bangor survey, the link to that will also be in the show notes. If you are at all interested in maybe coming to hang out with us in Bangor, there's going to be a lot of fun things. We're going to do a live recording with a special guest. We're gonna go on a tour of Bangor with SK Tours, who are sponsoring the event. We're gonna eat lunch. I like because that's a selling thing, just eating lunch. We're gonna eat food. It's gonna be good. Preferably. It's going to be a whole big cool event that we're really excited about, and we need to know how big, right? That's the big thing. We need to understand how big we need to make this event, and part of that is getting an idea from people, how many people are interested in coming. So please head to doofmedia.com/Bangor survey and fill out that short survey. It should only take a few minutes, and you will really help us get our head around how many people want to come to this thing.
Yeah. We'd really appreciate that. If you're at all interested, head on over there, and then we can make it the best time for everybody.
Yeah. And as a little bit of an added incentive for that, we are doing a raffle giveaway for people that enter. So if you have entered the survey, you are automatically entered into a raffle to win one of 3 copies of Stephen King's newest novel, Holly, that comes out in early September. So if you are interested in coming and also possibly want to win that book, go ahead and do it. And you have a pretty good chance. 3 copies.
Yeah.
All right. So that is that. I think that's it, right? If you want to support us outside of going to the survey, please do that. But you can also head to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels. We have a bunch of bonus content, cool things. We're also talking about tentatively doing a discounted rate on our Kingslingers live event for folks that are active patrons. We haven't quite worked out the details of that, so we're not saying how much it is or what any of that thing is. But that is a potential. So if you're at all interested in that, patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate that. Also, please consider giving the Doofcast a rating and review over on Apple Podcast. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. All right, folks, that's it for us this week. Next week, Rashomon. I'm very excited. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.